Joining us in the studio is a lawyer, social development advocate, Olutumbosun Shifowora. It's nice to have you join us this morning.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Welcome. Great.
Morning.
Now, the suspension of Abdulrasheed Bawa, by a lot of persons, say they are not surprised because it seemed to be the what happens every time a new administration comes on board, where the EFCC, and in fact almost all EFCC chairmen, towards a certain level, they get suspended for one reason or the other, and so on. Well, before we go into the issues of allegations and all of that, a lot of Nigerians are concerned that EFCC should be an institution that should run in such a way that when the chairman is appointed, he runs his tenure, his time in office, and then he exits when he has to exit. Talk to us from this window. It looks like, well, this is just what happened from Ribadu to the others, to Ibrahim Magu, and so on.
To Lamade, Farida.
Exactly, Farida.
All right, I think it's just the same pattern. But I think let's start from the point of law. Now, if you look at the EFCC Act 2004, it's been also reviewed and amended, like that. But the basics in the law says that the president will appoint the chairman of the EFCC, the commission, subject to confirmation by the Senate. So technically, your appointment is at the instance of the president. Now, that leaves us with, there's been argument back and forth that, okay, is the agency a political tool in the hands of, the executive and all that? That argument is neither here nor there. One, because the president or the executive would like to work with somebody that they are in sync with. At the same time, that also speaks largely to the independence of the commission, because there's a thin line between working with someone that our goals are in sync and also drawing the line also would mean that how much influence will the president wield over such a person whose employment is at its instance. So it now depends on how much the president is given to the rule of law. Because if it's somebody who believes in the rule of law, then you will have an independent agency. If it's somebody who doesn't believe in the rule of law, then that means that the agency becomes a tool to witch hunt in the hand. We've seen that before. Excuse me. We've seen that happen, in earlier administrations, and we saw how at the end of the day, when that administration goes, the fallout and everything, you see that this thing was actually a tool. The agency was used as a tool. But really, the agency is independent, but is also attached to the executive and somewhat attached to the president, because the laws are clear, and that's it. Now, so that's why you find out that, and people, particularly opposition, are always quick to come and cry wolf, that this man was removed because of this. And unfortunately, too, if you look at the pattern from Ribadu up to Bawa, they tell you that abuse of office. Abuse of office can be as wide as this, and it can be as tiny as this. Yeah. And then they have not really we're not privy to the the specific allegations, but they've given us a blanket one, abuse of office. And then also, what they have done is that he needs to step aside while his investigation is going on. I feel that's in order. In all fairness, that's in order, because he wasn't like arrested. What happened in the case of Ribadu was different from what we've seen with Bawa. So he wasn't like he was hounded and everything. He was first asked to step aside, hand over to the director of operations, then, pending investigation. If the investigation comes out to be in his favor, maybe he will return, maybe he will move on to something else. That is also at the discretion of his employers. But as it stands, I think they started on a good note. Stepping aside, investigating him, and finding out what has gone down. I think it's been with the DSS and trying to, shed more light on what's gone down. But for me, I came in contact with Bawa during the subsidy probe. Fantastic young man, brilliant, fantastic, and thorough. And, you know, I saw some things in the news. If I'm on a WhatsApp group, my law school set, and I said, see, I can stake my certificate on this man. You see if he's corruption and all those things. You know, somebody was like, you just lose your certificate. I said, well, you know, Nigerians, we have a way of, you know, looking at, I said, from my dealings with him back then, you know, everybody came with all sorts of things during the subsidy. And this one, he was a young man, he had nothing to lose, but he stood his ground. And he did a fantastic job. Now, so with what has come now, well, we'll have to leave it to the administration and see the outcome of the investigation. And, you know, let's just believe that everything will follow its due course. And then we will, once definitely the outcome of the investigation, were particular about it, because we saw the allegation, I mean, what has been put forward was abuse of office. And like I said, abuse of office can be as big as what it is, and it can be as tiny as whatever they say it is. Now, so then also we saw the allegation by Matawali, but we saw a rejoinder by Bawa that bring your evidence. If you said you have video, because there was a rejoinder from him where he said that Bawa wanted to collect money or he collected money and all that. And Bawa came out whilst he was in office and said, say, if you have anything like that, bring it out. We have not seen anything from Matawali. Maybe he's still, you know,
Putting it together.
Putting it together or still working on his retirement. But well, maybe that also might form part of the investigation. We don't know. But for now, what we know is that Bawa is no longer on sit. Bawa is under investigation. And pending when the outcome, or by the time the outcome of the investigation is out, then we'll be able to say specifically and maybe try him in the court of public opinion.
No, but of course, well, that shouldn't happen, even though he's now in the eye of the storm. And this accusation is something that, you know, many politicians that the agency has, you know, clamped down on, so to speak, have also been, you know, talking about this issue of court of public opinion as against the regular courts. But looking at ICPC, the laws enabling ICPC, the laws enabling EFCC, I don't know, there's something that does stand out, the EFCC out. You said something about the fact that the president has the right to hire and fire, but, you know, moving forward...
Subject to Senate confirmation.
Absolutely. But you know, moving forward, what should we do about that office, the office of the chairman? And people have said it's sad that this is happening to Bawa, because he rose from the system as against his predecessors who were brought in from the police force. And but how should we, you know, protect that office, so to speak, in addition, when you look at the work that they're doing, clamping down on graft?
All right. Now, the thing is this. We've all craved a fantastic Nigeria. And if we want a good country, probity is also, and accountability will come into play. Because if you have been head of an office, and you're called and you're probed regarding your activities there, I don't think it's out of line to probe someone regarding activities. And also, you know, I said we're not privy to certain information that those who have called him to accountability are privy to. So we could only speak based on what has been made available to us. They said that he's being called for investigation regarding abuse of office. We don't know how much he abused the office. We don't have the specifics of the abuse. Now, but at the same time, I am a fan of probity and accountability. If you have headed, or if you've been the head of an agency and your employers feel that you need to answer to some things, I think it's very much in order. Regardless of how fantastic, how impeccable your character is, it comes with the office that, okay, fine, you have to answer to some things. And that's why I said that what everybody should be interested in is the outcome of the investigation. What we have in Nigeria, most times, you take someone out of an office, then the next thing, we don't hear anything again. The thing just, whatever happened to Ribadu and how it went down, we don't really have the report. Same for Farida, same for Lamode, same for Magu. But this time around, I think everybody is interested in Bawa because, I mean, this is a promising young man. And you don't want to cut his career short in his prime. And at the same time also, that's why I said there's a thin line between this thing. At the same time also, he is accountable to certain persons. And if the persons call him to order or call him for investigation, he hasn't got a choice, no matter how much we love him. So as for the office and protecting the office, I think this is how to protect the office, in fairness. Yesterday, I was somewhere on the same platform, and somebody was like, okay, this DSS that I've been calling everybody, who will probe the DSS? Somebody said, I said, well, in as much as that sounds laughable.
Really good question,
funny,
I'm telling you.
Somebody said, who will probe the DSS? I said, well, so someone wrote God.
Especially as the DSS is also answerable to the presidency.
Yes.
So to speak.
But I think they have their own internal
answerable
mechanism.
to us.
Of course, I think
So
they
in
have.
the final analysis,
They should have their internal
people.
mechanism.
So it fits
the people hold sway. The people hold sway in the final, because the DSS is responsible to the government, to the president. The president is responsible to the people. So, but the only thing is that you can only wait 4 years before you now come and probe the president and let him come and give his own scores as well. And you can only do that with your vote, whether you give him the vote to continue or you give him the vote to someone else who you feel is better than him. That's basically.
When it comes to the issue of independence, because you started talking about this, of course, there should be some level of independence. But the ICPC, EFCC, INEC, and all of that, National Population Commission, all of those agencies are all directly under the presidency. So even when we talk about the enabling laws, how independent can they be really?
One, we have to settle the fact that they have to be under somebody. That's one. Then also, if you look at the laws that set up all these agencies, you find out that most of your appointments are subject to Senate confirmation. In some instances, some are subject to both houses confirming the person. So that gives some level of balance. And at the end of the day also, whatever they do, you end up in court. So those persons, those agencies are still open to a balanced system.
Okay.
It's fine, in as much as they are under the president, there are other arms of government that can actually stop the president from overreaching.
Right.
But the unfortunate part is that most times we have the president that is, if the president is very powerful and is somebody that has an overbearing presence, most times that whittles down the argument of balance. Now, but also, by the books and by the laws, there are other agencies that come to play with in respect of striking a balance regarding the independence of these agencies. And I want to follow the law.
Okay.
And not follow gist. So I would just hang it on that point.
All right.
After all, you're the lawyer. But,
Exactly.
Speaking about Abdulrasheed Bawa, I recall recently you spoke about his antecedents, how he stands out, and I recall seeing him in court recently, still on the fuel subsidy issue, and the way he spoke, the knowledge, the air, the charisma he carried, even that, as much as many of us were astounded by his brilliance, this is not just a chairman, this is somebody who even investigated, he led the investigation of these fuel subsidy scams, and he's coming in to testify not as a chairman but as the head of the investigative team. And but then that also put him in so many controversies. We recall the battles he had with the Kogi State governor, even Matawale that we've spoken about, and so many other issues. It brings us back to the issue of, is the EFCC, or how well the EFCC under him fared in terms of prosecution as against the regular allegations of persecution? What do you have to say in that regard?
Right.
Not just about Bawa, but
I'll keep drawing the thin line between in this argument and fine. There's no agency that is above the law. We saw some committal proceedings against the person of the chairman of the agency, and that in itself is not the way to go. With all sense of responsibility, that is not how things should pan out. I mean, if you as an agency, you thrive by approaching the courts, seeking justice from the courts, then when the court gives any judgment or ruling that is against your office or your person, I think it is just natural. It is, I mean, common sense dictates that you should follow the law because
the order was vacated eventually.
Eventually, but in that instance, you know, for a committal proceeding to be brought against you, that means that you have stood against the court and not really followed the order of the law. I think there was one or two instances like that. Now, but you see, I wouldn't want to define his office and his tenure in as much as those are not palatable instances. I mean, there are 1,000,001 instances where, you know, you're wearing a fantastic shirt, white shirt.
Just like yours.
Now, so if there's an oil spill on that shirt, most times people will look at the oil
And not the shirt.
appreciate the shirt.
That's true. That's true.
They will not look at the price. They will not look at how fitting it is on you and all that. So we tend to look at, you know, the minor things. Though I'm not ruling out the minor things, there is no instance where the agency is expected to be in such a position where they will stand, you know, against the decisions of the court. That is not palatable. That will not be condoned under any guise. Now, so that happened, but I think in the end they actually, you know, complied with the position of the court. But I think that does not define Bawa and his tenure as the chairman of EFCC.
The issue of political persecution, you know, don't you want to address that? Or do you feel that it's just a tough job, you know, as is...
Sincerely speaking, it's a very tough job. It's a very tough job. It's a very tough job. I know I've had, I mean, from my early days of practice, and I've had dealings in the EFCC, though I'm always on the part of the defendants, you know, like that. I mean, I go represent clients and all that, but sometimes I wonder how they crack some things. You know, as a lawyer, you're paid to defend your clients. And though I can only defend my clients to the extent that the law permits, but sometimes I marvel at how the agency works. I have a bit of insight into, you know, their activities, and I know that some of them work under very strenuous conditions. Some of them work under, there was a particular administration that almost didn't fund the EFCC. And they still kept on doing their job like it was normal. And they were working against, you know, against all odds. And I think that's very commendable for the agency. And I feel whoever steps in next has a big task on his hand. And I also hope that he wouldn't go down the way the predecessors have gone down. Now, as for political
prosecution of you know, politically exposed persons,
that, you know, we're all political animals, and when things go your way, you don't say anything. If it doesn't go your way, then you cry wolf, you cry, I'm being persecuted, I'm being. If you look at their activities, except we have basic or specific instances where we can say this person was actually a victim of political persecution, I think the EFCC has been thorough. They've been thorough, and you know, initially you see a situation where they'll say things, people will go, EFCC, they come again, all this allegation. At the end of the day, when the thing lands in court, hardly do you find people being acquitted. Most of the people they take, there is always one thing you find on them. And then the guilty verdict by the courts always point to the fact that these people have actually done a fantastic job. And I think the commission is a very sensitive one. The commission is a very germane one to the success of any political administration. And whichever way you look at it, you have to, the president or whoever is in charge needs to give vent to, need to look at who is heading the institution, so that, because he speaks well concerning the administration and how well the administration has done. Because if you look at, the agency stands to fight corruption, basically. Beyond finance, corruption, all kinds of corruption, from financial crimes to even terrorism, it's part of what they do. And that's an enormous task. So definitely that kind of agency will catch the eye of the president. And the president will always be interested in how the agency functions well. if the administration is to be rated well also, you have to look at such agencies and you have to really look at their activities and see how you can enhance what they do so that they can actually do well. Because in the end, the success of the agency is the success of the administration.
Exactly.
So that's why I feel that whatever is being done now, we will just wait for the outcome and see how it pans out and then hope for the best.
All right. The Habeas Corpus Act has stated that no one should be detained more than or above, is it 24 hours or 48 hours, as the case may be. But sometimes we see the DSS hold these people sometimes for days. We recall that the CBN governor is still with the DSS, you know, and so what do, from the eyes of the law, like you would like to speak from the eyes of the law, give us an enlightenment in this regard. Is the DSS contravening the law in keeping these persons beyond 40?
All right, we'll have to make some explanation.
All right.
It's a fundamental right of any citizen not to be detained beyond 24 hours in the Constitution. It's there. Then also, if you look at, there's another angle to it also, which says that in instances where they cannot find a court or where the person can be arraigned, then you extend to 48 hours. Now, but over time, in the course of practice, there's been instances where the investigating agencies, EFCC, DSS, I mean, all of them, they've had to approach the court for extension. You know, so there's an application you bring before the court that you need to extend the period for which you hold this person pending investigation. Most times it's 30 days. Now, what majority of the people know is what the Constitution says, don't hold someone beyond 24 hours. You have to arraign him in court. You know, but to avoid a situation where you keep amending charges back and forth and it makes you look like you don't know what you're doing, there are certain instances where where things pan out in such a way that you need proper time for investigation. And also what some people will say is that, why don't you investigate before you go after people? There are also instances where some people are a flight risk. So you need to hold them down first. Then, so you approach the court. So we're not privy to, most times the public is not privy to the fact that they've gone to get an extension from court. But because over time too, they realize that this thing, you know, rubs off negatively on these institutions. So they just go approach the court and get it. So by the time you approach them, you find out that they already have to keep him for that length of time.
Just like a warrant.
Exactly.
Okay, we'll come back to this. Let's go on a short break and then we'll be right back. You're watching TVC Breakfast. We're discussing the suspension of the EFCC chairman, Abdulrasheed Bawa. So a lot of Nigerians are not surprised, but they're saying that, why don't we run a system where there is a respect for their tenure? And if at the end of their time in office, you find anything wanting, of course, you can invite them to come and say, come and answer for this while you were in office, as the case may be. But in all, the lawyer in the House has told us the man who has the powers and authority to hire can always also suspend and can also fire. Anyway, subject to the National Assembly. We have Olutumboso Shifora here, a lawyer, helping us to make sense of all of these issues in here. Kemi, you were going to ask a question.
I just wanted to know if you have a sense as to whether Mr. Bawa ought to have resigned, you know, earlier than now. The heat has been on him. Of course, it would have been a first, so to speak. But do you feel like the man you know should have perhaps resigned, given room for a robust investigation of the allegations against him?
No, the issue of investigation came from the president. And
no, I mean the allegations of abuse of office are not exactly new. Yaya Bello of Kogi State, said made weighty allegations against him about how a demand of some bribe was made by Mr. Bawa. Same for former Governor Matawale, and some civil society groups too also said as well.
In this climb, when you resign in the face of certain allegations, most times people always pass a guilty verdict on you. Resignation is not seen in the light. In the Western world, when somebody comes with even some domestic issues, you just feel, no, people don't have the trust in me, I'm going. And they just move on like that. in this part of the world, we don't see things like that. Now, most times when people come with allegations, I think for the one from Yaya Bello and Matawali, there was a rejoinder from the office of Bawa.
Of the...
And I think in his own wisdom, he felt that was enough. I mean, my job is too big to be distracted by such things. And you know, most times the people who actually come after them are the politicians. And you know, at the end of the day, there was something that was said to about Matawali that, see, this man who is making noise here, I mean, with all due respect to his person and his position, or former position, that this man who is crying and shouting here is answering to certain charges here. So he's trying to whip up public sentiment. And I think that was how, you know, they were able to just move past what came from that quarters. Now, so basically, because of the task ahead of you, and then you see, we're not that much strong in this climb to toe that line. You know, I mean, I want to go back to something we said earlier about, you know, independence of agencies. Most agencies still pander to power. We don't have that much of, you know, overt independence where somebody can an agency can unilaterally investigate the president and, you know, come up with the investigation. We have not. We're still teaching.
The president even enjoys immunity, so to speak.
Yes, but you know, in some instances, I mean, the countries where they go all out. I mean, if you hear that you're investigating the president here, everybody go, you're not afraid. Like, you see your village people. You know, that's how we see it here. But in other places where there is true independence of agencies like this, they can go ahead and take up anything. And at the end of the day, they will present their investigation. And if the president will have to go based on what they've done, he will leave. But in this part of the world, we're still growing. And maybe by the time our children come on the scene, we will get to that level in Nigeria. But for now, we still pander to power.
All right, as we wrap up, we've had the debate where as much as the president or chief executives have immunity, they can't be prosecuted while in office. But does the EFCC have the power to monitor behind the scenes what the state governors are doing with their funds, whether there is allegations against the governor or government or not? Just behind the scenes. We're not talking about prosecution.
Absolutely. The EFCC Act permits that. Right. In fact, it says it can investigate individuals, it can investigate corporate bodies and agencies of government. They've got the powers to do that. They've got the powers to do that. You see, the idea of immunity, I think, is just overstretched here. The idea of immunity from prosecution or even any form of litigation for an executive position is based on the fact that if they keep dragging the governor to court every day, he won't have time to discharge the primary duty for which is there. That's the concept of immunity. Okay. It's not a shield. It is for protection of the office, not to shield the individual from being investigated. But you see, in this, we have extended and expanded things beyond what the law actually says it is. But I tell you for free, it is to protect the office and allow a proper daily running of the office, and not to protect that person or give him a shield to make him go ahead and commit all sorts of atrocities and evil. That's not the essence of immunity for such positions.
Amazing. All right, we have to leave it here now. Olutumbo Osifowora, thank you so much for giving us insight into all of the issues today around the EFCC and so on.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.